recorded, or is it
fine
just
if it is.
Is it fine?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
Ah,
It's good.
Cool. No, so obviously, yeah, welcome to week 3. It's a grey old morning, but no, thank you for all coming out. Yeah, no, and obviously we've got 2 fantastic speakers. We have Annelies, who's coming. I think you're here to talk about 11, is it?
Yep.
And
And then
Ian jumping in as well to kind of give us a session about NCEA. So yeah, that should be informative, and hopefully, obviously, it's one of those things where even if your kids aren't at NCEA level yet, like it's going to be relevant going forwards, just to kind of start having that understanding. So no, that's pretty my kind of spiel at the beginning. So now the big one is Kendiel reminded me of with the feedback surveys, just making sure we fill in the feedback, just so we kind of know how we can make the future sessions look as well. So that's the big one. I'll pass it to Annelies.
Kia ora, thank you. Thanks for coming today. I thought we might just start off with a karakia. I don't know, does anyone want to share something in their language, or I'm happy to do it in Te Reo?
Te Reo is fine.
Te Reo's fine?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one that we often do in our work. So it talks about lifting the potential of young people, empowering them with education to go forward as leaders into the future. So I think that's really timely, considering what we're talking about today is about helping our young people have the best opportunities in education. So join in if you want, otherwise just follow on the screen. Ka hikatea, 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 whakarewa ke runga rawa, he rea ke kore e hoki whakamuri mai, poa atu te pūmanawa Māori, he mana tikanga, me te uri o maia, poia nā mokupuna, nā rangatira o apopo, ka tihei mōreora. Encourage and support and raise it to its highest level, ensure that high achievement is maintained, hold fast to our Māori potential, our cultural advantage, and our inherent capability. Nurture our young generation, the leaders of the future. Behold, we move onwards and upwards. So just to start, I'll just introduce myself. Ko Annelies Mead toku ingoa. My name's Annelies. Ko Tamaki Makoru, taku kaingarua. So I'm from Auckland, and this is my maunga, Maunga Kiki, which is One Tree Hill. I now live in Te Whanganui Atara in Wellington, and this is my mountain here, which is the other side of Mount Coco there. And this is my family. I have 2 young children, and that's why I have to leave a bit early today, and my colleagues taking over. So I have 2 girls, Lena and Sophia, and that's my husband, James. I've been a teacher at Onslow College, just over there, for the last 15 years, also in Auckland, and I taught languages, Spanish. I also taught history and social studies, so for secondary school. And I was also a dean, so involved in the pastoral care of Year 9 students who are about 13 years old. And more recently, I've been working at the Open Polytechnic in learning design. So I'm very passionate about education. I think it's very important. I have also been involved in the new changes. So there's big new changes which I'm going to talk about today. And so I've been involved in that from a languages curriculum space. And that's how I've ended up here at the Ministry of Education. And I've been here for 1 month, so I'm new. But my role in the ministry is a NIF. So we are a group of people. We see ourselves as an army who work with schools. We work with teachers to help them understand the new NCEA changes. And I'll talk through all of that today, but that's a little bit about me. And this is my first community hub gathering, so it's great to be here with you today. And Ian, when he arrives, will introduce himself. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to talk to you about NCEA at the moment, what NCEA is today. And then I'm going to talk about how it's changing, because if you have young children, they will be with the new NCEA, because next year it changes. So some of it might not be relevant because your child will be older and will be joining the new NCEA. So that I'll talk about the changes to what's happening. Ian is probably going to talk to you about what you can be doing at home to support your child as they go into NCEA. So what you can be doing at home with them, and then we'll show you where you can go for more information. Okay? Welcome. You can come up here if you want. Okay. So, this because we're a small group, just ask questions as we go. Let's make this really interactive so you get what you want out of the session. But before we go ahead, is there anything in particular that you would like answered today that you think I haven't included on the agenda? Is there anything specific that you do want to have answered so we know to include that in the session? Otherwise, feel free to ask as we go through if there's anything that's unclear. Okay?
I'm just
Yes.
curious, what was the reasoning behind the changes like?
Yep, I'll answer that. That's a good question. Yeah, why are we changing? Yeah.
Remind reader.
Oh,
You read the agenda very well.
Very good.
yeah.
Okay, very good.
I think it was touched on last time. I mean, every from Zimbabwe, I guess I came from Cambridge,
Yes,
And
which
then-
is yeah.
and then I think South Africa is Madrid, and then I don't know what's in East Africa. Oh, no.
Different.
Yeah, it's different. Everything's different.
Yes.
How does if you could let me know, how does NCEA? I think this was answered last week.
Yes.
But if you can, how does it compare to everything else? Because I think, like our colleague here said, it's a different way of learning. Or at least that's what I heard. So if you can flesh that out some more.
Yes, I think Cynthia gave us a bit of a heads up about wanting to know if you are taking this qualification and wanting to go to a university overseas, how does it stand?
Yeah.
So we've got a slide on that which Ian will talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because I do talk to some of the guys, and this Nigerian fellow goes, the way maths, even in the newspapers, in the news, New Zealand's lagging behind in literacy and mathematics, especially I always get this wrong. OECD. OECD. I always go OECD. OECD. Okay. New Zealand's lagging behind in the OECD, and it doesn't compare favorably. And the rumblings have been going on for a long time about the way maths is taught. And I think you touched on there's no syllabus. Everything's administered by the school is in charge of implementing the syllabus, whereas we came from a place where the government, these were the textbooks, these were, so I'm quite looking forward.
I can talk about under the new NCEA changes how the curriculum, how it's organised. Yep,
Excellent.
absolutely. Okay, so do you want to just let me know what you know already about NCEA? Maybe show me a little hand if it's I know heaps about it, or I know a little bit, or don't know anything at all, which is totally fine. So there's no hands, there's no hands, no hands. I can say whatever I like then. There's no hands. Okay, that's good. So tell me to slow down if I'm going too fast. I'm happy to kind of explain. So I'm going to go through currently what NCEA is, and then I'm going to talk about what it's going to change to. Because does anybody have anybody doing the current NCEA? Does anyone have children who are in year 11 this year? No. So all of your children are primary, intermediate.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then I won't go into too much detail about what it currently is like. I'll then focus on the changes, which is what your children will be entering into. Okay? So what remains the same is we have NCEA stands for National Certificate of Educational Achievement. So this is the qualification that a student gets when they go through secondary school. So it encompasses year 11, which is when they're about, so that goes year 9, 10, 11, 11 being when they're about 15 years old. So year 11, they're doing what's called level 1 of NCEA. It's a three-year kind of qualification, and they can achieve the qualification at each year level, and depending on how they achieve will depend on what their pathway is. So level 1 is for year 11s, level 2 is for year 12, and level 3 is for year 13, which is the last year of school. But students can leave school earlier than that, but that's what's offered at secondary school. At each year level, to achieve the qualification, they have to do assessments, like tests, assessments in the subjects that they choose, and they gain what's called credits. So each assessment is worth a number of credits, and adding up all those credits will then give them the level that they achieve at. Okay, so currently a student has to do 80 credits to get level 1. That's a lot. That has caused a lot of stress for students and for teachers, and that number is changing. It's going to go to 60. And that, as I go through the changes, I'll go through that in more detail. So they have to achieve these credits, and that gives them the level 1 qualification.
So going to 60, does that mean you expect them to achieve less?
No. It means the focus is going to be more on the teaching and learning than on assessments. At the moment, the teaching and learning programs are all focused on assessment, and that's not working for our students. And so, do you agree? When you
No,
do it?
when you say, because you explained it, that obviously the credit means the number of courses that they have to do, not necessarily the number of.
Yeah,
the
so
marks.
typically a student might take 5 subjects, and within each subject they are offered so many
Credits.
like they call them standards, and standards is a name for an assessment. So they might be doing English, and in the English course they might have the option of doing 6 standards or 5 standards, and each standard is worth 6 credits, for example. And so they do all of those to get however many credits, which then contributes to the 80. But there's inequity in there. There's inequity over the subjects, there's inequity over how many credits students are doing all over the place, so that's why things are changing. So I don't want to go into too much detail about this number because we'll go over that in the changes.
Yeah.
But the idea I want you to understand is that a student takes a subject and they earn credits through their assessments, and then that contributes to the qualification. Okay? And I'll tell you about how that's administered when I go through the changes. Level 2, they do that many credits at the moment, but that's changing, so we won't focus on that. And then you've got level 3. Now, in order to get this qualification, they have to get literacy and numeracy. It's very important. Currently, a student can only get literacy and numeracy through standards which are tagged as literacy or numeracy standards. So you might take a maths subject and that's where you get some of your numeracy credits, or in English or a history you might be getting your literacy credits. That's changing. So I'm not going to go into detail about how you currently get literacy and numeracy because it won't matter for you. But the same issue, the same situation is that for you to get NCEA, you have to achieve at level 3 and you have to get literacy and numeracy. Okay? So I'm not going to go through how you get literacy and numeracy now because you don't have secondary school students this year. I'll go through that in a minute. The requirements for university entrance have not been communicated yet by the Ministry of Education. Nobody knows from next year how students are going to get what they need for university entrance. I imagine it will probably be quite similar to how it currently is. So currently, for you to get university entrance, you need to have achieved the literacy and numeracy, which you will have done probably in level 1 and level 2. And you need to have 14 credits in 3 subjects, 3 approved subjects. So that might mean that you need to have done history. It's very long, the list. It's not very refined. It's not very, it's very inclusive of all subjects. But there are subjects, you choose 3, and of those 3 you need to do 14 credits. So 14 credits in 3 approved subjects. So if
total or for each?
for each subject. So if you imagine you're taking English and each assessment is 5 credits, so you could do just 3 assessments in English, and that would be one of your approved subjects.
Okay.
So you only need really to have studied potentially to get you university entrance. So university entrance is easier than getting level 3. So you can get university entrance and not get level 3, because level 3 is you need more. You need 80 credits for level 3 currently, but you only need 14 times 3.
42. Yeah.
Plus, good one, good numeracy there, plus the literacy numeracy to get the university entrance. Obviously, for university, here's Ian! So early.
Ian. So our next speaker coming.
Yes. So, now I'm forgotten what I was going to say. So obviously it will depend on what the student wants to do at university, because depending on the course they will have their own requirements. But that to get the university entrance kind of qualification or the award or whatever, that's what they currently need. But as I say, at present we don't know exactly what UE will be under the new change. Watch this space.
Next year, probably.
Yeah, hopefully.
So,
I would imagine it wouldn't be drastically different.
Yeah.
so question, maybe
Sorry.
practically, like, am I wrong to assume that students will need a level 3 if they are to pursue like complicated subjects in uni?
Yes.
And maybe just the minimum qualification if they want to pursue easier programs at uni, or?
Yeah, it depends on what is, if you're doing engineering or something, for you to enter into that course, you probably need to demonstrate that you have some skills in maybe higher numeracy or, a particular subject.
Which is level 3, or?
Which will be probably one of these approved subjects, level 3, but they might want 2 sciences. They want more than just the 3 subjects. So that's why when we'll look at pathways as one of our PowerPoint slides, but that's why really understanding,
Yeah.
having conversations with your child early on about what their pathways are, and ensuring that you are communicating that with the school to make sure that they will have everything they need to enter into what their pathway will be. Okay, there was another question here.
I was going to ask
Yeah.
if, since there are so many credits here, there are some schools that do not, because of maybe teacher availability or what they historically focus on, that they may not be doing certain courses, which may, or they may also be even doing some courses that are not necessarily approved, so to speak. And then I was just going to say that my sense is that just as you are anticipating that it's likely the standard for the university entrance will be the same, it's likely because it looks like they are being crowded so much here, but they don't need that much to enter the university.
That's right, you
They are
can
able to
see,
do one.
yeah, they're over-assessing.
Yeah.
And that really, they only need, you know, they don't need all of that. If they do something well, that encompasses the skills that they need to demonstrate that they are capable of, you don't need to do that 20 times.
Got you.
You just, you know, enjoy your learning and having that time to discover what that subject offers. The tagged list, so the list of approved subjects, is on the NCEA website. NCEA is the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. So they are, so we're the ministry, we kind of, I suppose, come up with the policy and the writing of the curriculum, and then suggest, you know, this is how we want the achievement or the test to look like, but NCEA are the people that make it happen. So they are the ones that send it to the schools they are the ones that mark it if it's external. So they have a list of all those approved subjects, and it's long. It's really, really long. So I would presume most subjects are approved. Okay. So I know there's a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe a last question, a bit maybe I'm trying to marry what happens in Africa or back home, and you're probably the right person to ask because you've taught in college and such. So what happens in Africa is I will take a subject like English. My English will include the usual English writing sentences and all, and also a literature component where I will study books and I'm examining on those books. So my understanding with so we will get, then I would sit for one exam and I'll get one single grade for English as a subject. But my understanding with the credit system is for English, I'll probably get I'll get credits from bits of English, like I'll get credits for literature, I'll get credits for maybe performance, I'll get credits for drama,
Yes.
and such. So not just one bulk thing for my...
Yes, you're on the right track. So we'll talk about the new changes. So with these new changes, each subject will only have 4 assessments. Every subject. Doesn't matter how important that person thinks the subject is.
Yeah.
English, maths, Spanish, drama, art, digital tech, all only will offer 4 standards. So 4 assessments. And those standards are regarded to be kind of the really important skills or learning that a student should be demonstrating at that level. 2 of those are done through the year. So they're called internals, so they do little activities during the year, and 2 will be external, so they're done in term 4 at the end of the year, and they are marked by NCEA. So for English, one of those standards might be research a piece of literature and write, you know, write an essay on a particular focus on that piece of literature. One assessment might be on the different types of media or something. One assessment will be on another skill of English, and then the 4th will be on another separate skill again. So yeah, but I'll talk about that in a minute, because you don't have to do all 4. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're gonna, because no one's in the current system, we're just gonna jump ahead and look at what the changes are, and I think it'll all come together. So when they do this assessment, which is either going to be an internal done in the year, term 1, 2, or 3, or in term 4, the student will get a grade. So they'll get what's one of these grades. Not achieved, so that means they have not earned those credits, those 5 credits. They have not earned those 5 credits, or they have earned those 5 credits with a grade of achieved, or they've earned it with a grade of merit, and the top one is they've earned it with the grade of excellence, and that will come on their record, their academic record for NCEA. So it will say, this child earned this internal on literature with achieved, or merit, or excellence, or not achieved. And they will have earned, if they got achieved or above, they would have earned those 5 credits, and those credits will contribute to the 60 that they need to get level 1.
So is
That
there a
makes sense.
difference between the number of credits you earn for excellence and the number of credits you
No.
earn for achieve?
No, it's the same number, but the level in which you earned those credits is graded as N, A, M, or E. And the assessment criteria has already been written up. So it's the same assessment criteria. What it's marked against is the same for each student. So ideally, this is what they want the students to be getting out of this qualification, is it's a level 1, they have a really solid foundation of skills and knowledge that they can build upon. Level 2 is often the minimum qualification they will need, so if they are having a pathway which is not going into level 3, it might be that they go to facilitator or another kind of tertiary program, or a skills program, industry-based learning. That's often at level 2. And then level 3 is along with that university entrance requirement. And that's what they often need to get into tertiary programs. So, there's a lot. I know I've talked about the old system, but I think the idea of what NCEA I've covered lightly, that it is those 3 levels, this credit system, how it's graded, how literacy and numeracy are really important elements of the qualification. I'm going to get you to reflect on your own education system and see, you don't need to write, you can just look at this and think about it, but I want you to think about what's your experience of education. So I know you talked about your experience or Cambridge, you know, what was that like? Was it very assessment driven? Was it lots of reading, writing? Was it, you know, was it just a 1-year program or 2 years, year 11 and 12? What have you learnt so far about the New Zealand education system? And we'll add to this as we go through. And is there anything similar? Is it just subjects, or is there anything so far that you see that's a bit similar? So I just want you to kind of start reflecting on your experience and what your child's experience is going to be. And we might, as we go through the new system, build on this. So I've got some pens. So you don't have to write, you can just talk to the person sitting next to you. It just take like 2 minutes just to kind of think about it. And as you do this, you might be getting even more questions. Hi there.
The assessment begins very early, although they will not stop you from progressing. Maybe some experience with
Yeah, let's do it. Oh yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Very assessment.
Yes.
We have also gone through it. So how that's speaking, I'm thinking
Yeah,
about
we had O levels, okay.
Yeah.
So I think basically
Because
that
exams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right now currently
but I think at O level you had to do
what we do here we
minimum 7 subjects.
Okay.
And at A level it was 3.
Yeah, ours was 5
assessment before they go to secondary school, which is college. They do the assessment now.
A levels, they set a minimum number of points.
They may in between how
Depending on what you were doing at
So
university.
the first time they do the assessment first when they are finishing
Like medicine,
the end of intermediate.
A's or something.
When they do, they also have to go to
No, but
initially because of the now they are doing also other countries around
Yeah.
those who
yeah, like you never
It was the same exam that we wrote.
yeah, there's 8, 10, very clear, yeah. But here, like,
so
converting.
No, I meant 15 points for me. That's what I said.
maths and English is always like
Yes.
When I came up with
You don't know what
social studies.
Yeah. And if it was, say, NCEA level 2,
Maybe that one now goes to
level 3 fine because that's the final university. But level 1 and 2, there's neither here.
exercise or so that's
It's the same like you said.
I think
I think for me, another clearing thing was
what you had was
those people who
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the grade you get maths, so it's
Yeah.
1
Within,
or 2. And the credit was grade you had 6 and below that's a credit.
you got 4 points.
And then for A levels it was ABC plus.
Yeah, exactly. It was better than that.
A has a different meaning with this one.
That means that you'll be
Yeah, the name.
Oh, yeah. So that's why you don't really when you say A, everybody knows what an A means.
Exactly.
You're right at the top.
Very different.
subject.
never kind of planned.
No, really.
No, it was
So even when you go down to the one,
Yes, so that's the thing. That's how it used to be. When I was at school, it wasn't NCEA. So we had high stakes end of the year exams. And you don't sleep the night before, you don't remember your stuff. It's not the same here. You know, they had lots of opportunities during the year. And if you,
now equity is
yeah, which is
and some of them now they bypass
just naturally.
because it's like
You know, you're already the teacher
I know,
and
right.
this program. And then you take,
Civilized,
you understand.
yeah. Yeah, but one thing,
Remember
because
what
I
you're
came to New Zealand,
and assess here. Or, and it, you know, it's building on knowledge and, you know, recycling that knowledge and building skills. I think, I personally think it's a great system. And it allows
system as long as you started with it and continued. For instance, if somebody was doing
but we struggle with our diploma
Yes,
to get into the
here and
so
there.
that was our problem. That's what I asked maybe about. So what
Yeah, so it's a foundation, and I'm going to tell you in a minute, as long as there's no year
I
11.
think because
So it becomes a bit
they
like,
think that
what they have, you know, the A level stuff, and then becomes 2 year. So there's a
So I think it's
high foundational
but then
knowledge.
for
And
their
it's not saying what I do, it's in your own way.
yes.
a little stress. Like in Ghana, if you are finished, like my sister, Ghana people who finish common and those days, and those who finish just if they couldn't, if they don't do the quickly get after some years it becomes so easy.
Yes.
2 years.
So yeah, it sounds
When you understand that a bit,
When I was at a certain age, I knew more
we do some
than kids here at that certain
But it's about, it's changed now.
there was no TikTok.
Knowledge and skills are different, and we're moving across
a different society, there's no point learning all this stuff before, you know, I mean, you have to understand the knowledge, you have to be critical thinking, you have to do all of that. But if you just want to know facts, there's no point.
Yeah, because
You can just Google it. Like, I'm not going to remember all these dates.
I'm talking more about the maths and the
Yeah.
those things. Yeah, maths and the English. Because maths is
Well, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about
Those are the important things, like
literacy and numeracy. Okay, we'll come back. I think it's really interesting hearing about your own experience. Does anyone want to feedback? Is there any similarities at all?
Well, we spoke about, because we have a similar system across, because we all come from West Africa. I think in terms of the core subjects, which will be the numeracy and mathematics, and English, back home there are 2 additional courses, like social studies, which is very important for social
yes, we have
relations.
social studies.
And then core science, or what we call integrated science, yes. So those are also foundational courses, so to speak, which are part. So usually those are core subjects, and then you have maybe the list of the other courses that we spoke about. So I think that is the change here, where the core subjects are only numeracy and then English, but back home the system is a bit different. Although they may well be part of the other approved courses, but in back home usually they will expect that you have to at least these 4 core subjects are very important, that you earn a certain amount of this thing in order to progress to.
Some schools do make certain subjects core subjects. So, you know, most schools, because of the old system and the way you get literacy and numeracy, often maths and English were compulsory at year 11. But as I work through these changes, you'll see that you don't get your literacy and numeracy out of those subjects anymore. So that will potentially impact on the subjects that are made compulsory. But some schools do say, you know, you have to do PE, physical education, where you have to do these subjects, but that's a school-wide. Any differences? I think there are. I've heard.
So I think as we talked about, education system back home is more one exam that you do at the end of your 4 or 5 years, and that exam determines your life, basically determines what uni you go to, what course you get to do. Whereas here you're sort of examined throughout year 11 to year 13, which I guess gives you a more balanced.
That's right, and more of an idea of, you know, where your skills sit and what you need to be working on. So not a high stakes assessment as such.
And the other one is the university entry is only 2 years, Form 5 and 6. And then after that you go to university, you write an exam and then you go to university, depending on your grades. If you do very well, then you can be eligible for a certain kind of a profession. Maybe medicine would demand things like all A's or something like that at A level, and things like that. Whereas others like accounting.
Just walking.
Anything.
I'm offended.
Very good. I'm going to go through now the changes. So these basically in 2017 or so, it was always going to be that NCEA, this qualification, was going to be reviewed. That's just part of our education system, that the qualification was due to be reviewed, and that was mandated by the ministry. When they were doing that review and consulting whānau, teachers, students about this NCEA, the research showed that there was a lot of inequity in the qualification, and that there were some major changes that needed to happen to make it accessible, inclusive and equitable for all students. So through their consultation with those stakeholders and all the research, they came up with 7 key changes that they were going to change in the NCEA qualification. And I'm going to go through each change briefly, and then we'll watch a little video that goes through what these changes are. So, these changes are happening over the next few years. They start next year. So, at the moment, you might hear in the media the word piloting. So, at the moment, because there's all these new assessments and all these changes, we have schools around New Zealand trialling what this looks like so that we can get feedback and make changes before everybody has to do it. So that's called piloting, and that's happening right now. So right now some schools are trialling these changes, but they start next year, and I'll show you also a timeline of how this is going to play out over the next few years. But it sounds to me like your children will be they probably will come in at a good time, because everyone will know what they're doing by that stage, and they'll be fine. So one of the big changes was making NCEA more accessible, so you don't have to pay for it. There's no fees for NCEA and for scholarship. There are the way it's written is what's called a universal design for learning approach. So they are trying to write the assessments and the learning programs so that they are really inclusive, and barriers for people with different learning needs have been removed so that students don't need as much support when they're doing these assessments. There is still support available, which is called SAC, Special Assessment Conditions. So there's still support if a child needs a reader-writer or needs extra time to do an assessment or needs things printed out with bigger print, and that can all be done through the school. You don't have to go through NCEA anymore. It's all done through the school. So it's much easier for students to access the assessments and be part of the learning. Another big change is what's called mana orete mo te mataranga Māori. So it's saying that there is equal status for Māori knowledge, which are the tangata whenua, the people of Aotearoa. So through the new assessments and through our teaching learning programs, Māori knowledge is upheld, the mana of it, as just as important as other knowledges. That's also gone as such that there are now assessments that assess te ao Māori, te ao haka. So the haka, you can do that through your te reo course. You can be assessed in that mode of assessment. So that's upholding that Māori knowledge in that particular form. So there's lots of initiatives that are happening to uphold Māori knowledge. Another big change is what I was telling you about before. There's only 4 standards per subject. 2 are in the year, called internal, and 2 are external at the end of the year and marked by NZQA. Why? Because there was over-assessing. As a teacher, you felt like you weren't focusing so much on your teaching, but just telling them what they need to do the assessments. Students were doing, as you could see, way more than the 80 credits that they needed to do. They were doing like 120 credits. Just ridiculous, stressed out, mental health problems. So it's now you do 4 credits, which equates to a maximum of 20 credits per subject, and you only need 60 for each year level to get that level qualification instead of the 80. Students obviously will probably take a little bit more than the 60 just in case they want, for just a bit of leeway, but they only need the 60 to get the level 1 or the level 2 or the level 3. Number 4, and Ian's going to talk to this, is strengthening literacy and numeracy. So everyone's aware that our literacy and numeracy is not, the foundational knowledge needs to be lifted, And so a huge focus of this change is building the literacy and numeracy of children, of our students, and that starts from first year of primary. But particularly a huge focus as part of this NCEA change is lifting literacy and numeracy. Another change is making NCEA really simple. I think you could see that already. 60 credits, literacy and numeracy separate. It's just a little bit more easier to follow.
Just a question about strengthening the literacy and numeracy there. What exactly do you mean? Do you make it harder or do you make it compulsory? How do you strengthen it?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I will just mention what it is. So, depending on when the student is ready, in year 10 or 11, so that's 14, 15 years old, the students will do 3 assessments. Every student in New Zealand has to do these assessments to get the NCEA qualification, the literacy and numeracy. 2 of them are literacy tests in reading and writing, and 1 is a numeracy test, which is maths. And they sit this in school. It's a digital exam, and it's marked by NCEA, and they can do the test as many times as they like until they pass. So it's a pass or a fail. So it's separated from the maths and the English subjects. It's its own assessment. But every child has to do the assessment to achieve NCEA.
Can I just actually
Yes.
say too? I mean, that's the whole point of my presentation, so I don't want to get telling
So, and he explains it much better than me.
We'll go into much more detail.
You know, that's it. I say nothing. That's going to make you stay now, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's Ian. Start writing questions for Ian.
For Ian, yes.
The NCEA change is also about clear pathways, and I'll talk about that one in a minute. So that there's not just everybody going to university. That's not the, you know, we live in a new world where there's so many options, so many different pathways, and it's saying that they are validated as much as tertiary, and there are clear pathways. Students can see when they're at school the different options that are available to them very clearly, rather than what's out there for me. And the last one is about keeping it optional. So schools, it's up to the schools to decide whether or not they offer level 1. So we've talked to a variety of schools, and everyone's doing something different. Some don't decide to do level 1, but they might still do a few of those standards just to get the students prepared for level 2. Some have different kind of project work going through. They still have to be following the curriculum and the design of what they need to be doing, but it's not high stakes assessment for the learners. So I think schools make this decision based on, that what the parents want, what the students want. By not offering level 1 doesn't mean that you are not providing as many it's not, you're not reducing opportunities for the children, for the students. It's just giving students options to do what's best suited for their learning and their pathway.
So does that mean at university, as long as you have university entrance, they don't care whether you've got level 1 or...
Yeah, but that's always been the case.
Okay.
Even now, with the old system, no one ever looks at level 1. They look at level 2 and level 3. The only reason we've had level 1 really is to get students used to the assessments, and it gets them into their level 2 subjects really. But apart from that, maybe if they're going into different pathways, but we're going to have different, as I move on, we're going to have different, what's going on here? Different, Okay. Yeah, so the pathways are clearer. So at level 1, if they are at level 1, they don't offer that. They have other pathways that are open to them. So if your child is interested in different pathways, just note that the best people to talk to in the school are their dean, who is normally the pastoral care lead for their year group, or most schools have a careers advisor, or will be able to put the student in touch with a careers advisor to talk through what their options are, because they have connections to all of the different employment vocational options in Wellington. So there's so much going on, they know it all. So as part of this new NCEA, these are currently being developed, so I don't know a lot about it, but students will be awarded a vocational entrance award. So these are a demonstration of skills that certain industries require for them to be able to work in that industry. So it's kind of an award to show, oh look, I've got these particular skills to be able to work in this particular type of industry. So that's really helpful for students to use, you know, in addition to their NCEA level qualification. There's standards that are done by industries that have just as much credibility as standards that are being offered at school. So if school assessments aren't working or are not engaging your child, it's a good idea to look at what's industry offering that might be more engaging for my learner. They can still earn those credits and it might contribute to that NCEA qualification. So there's different pathways there. Students will also get what's called a graduate profile. So students will be able to say, I've done level 2, this is what I can do. Not just, I've done level 2, I've done maths, science, English, blah, blah, blah. They'll be able to say, these are the skills I have. This is the knowledge I have. This is what I can do, which is fantastic if they're trying to get a job. The job doesn't want to know that you've done English, maths, science. They want to know, yes, I can take leadership in these situations. I can think critically in these particular situations. So it's a really good way of demonstrating the students' ability. This here is just an image to show you all the different industries that NCEA can connect to. So there's, it's very broad. Right, I'm just going to finish that little session, that part, with a wee video, which hopefully plays. And this is really good at showing you from a student's perspective, because that's what's important, is your children are going to be the ones going through this, not us, how the changes will affect them and their future. And then I'll ask if there's any questions. I'll answer a few at the end of this.
NCEA is something we all have heard of, but doesn't mean we all understand it.
So that is why we are making this video about the changes with NCEA.
We are students from Tamaiti High School. Tamaiti High School is known for strong tikanga and good cultural diversity.
Each school has their own strengths. Some schools are known for being strong in sports, some are known for offering a huge range of subjects.
No matter what school you attend, everyone should get the same opportunity to succeed in NCEA.
Even within our kura, there are students with different learning needs.
And that's why our first change is to make NCEA more accessible. That means making learning relevant to all of our cultures, identities, disabilities, genders and sexualities in Aotearoa. The second change is about giving equal status for Mātauranga Māori in NCEA. This means making sure the subjects like Māori performing arts are valued and that you can explore te ao Māori in lots of assignments across different subjects.
So how do we know what subjects to take for the job that we want?
One of the changes is about making clearer pathways to further education or work. Further education can be like courses, apprenticeships, or universities. A pathway is what you're interested in, like health, design, or specific job that you want to have. To achieve NCEA, you have to show that you have functional literacy and numeracy skills. It means your literacy and numeracy skills are at a level where you can get things done in a workplace. We have 2 more changes to talk about. This one talks about fewer larger standards. At the moment, every school has a different achievement standards that they are doing. Teachers choose these from a long list of options. A student in one school could be offered 8 assignments totaling 26 credits, while a student in another school is offered 4 assignments totaling 14 credits. In a year, students will complete larger assignments, but less of them. Less assignments doesn't mean less learning, it means bigger assignments that involve more learning. This change means it is important to do every assessment instead of tapping out when you get the credits you need.
What do you mean by tapping out?
Like if a year 11 student gets 80 credits by the end of term 3, they might not attempt any of the other assignments, or they just start picking and choosing what they want to avoid because they have so many credits available. Then they miss out on the learning. So in English, every student will be doing 2 internals and 2 externals.
But I hate exams.
So externals don't have to always be exams. It could be a portfolio. So like 2 pieces of writing that get sent away to be marked.
So could I do them in class with my teacher?
And you'll have plenty of time to do it. Just remember, it's bigger assessments but fewer assessments. If you get a not achieved, you can resub for an achieved, but you cannot resub for merit or excellence.
Hold on, I thought you said we needed 80 credits. Wow, that's heaps.
So that's the last change we wanted to talk about. The structure is becoming more simple. So now you'll need 60 credits to achieve in each level, and it's less confusing because there's no carryover credits.
Do we need to remember all of this?
Hey Aha, we're just explaining to you just in case you hear there are changes being made.
Your teachers have it sorted for you and they will explain it to you.
I hope this video was helpful to you.
Good luck for next year with your NCEA.
Okay, so a lot of that is what I kind of said, but it's good to reiterate. Now, I'm going to pass over to Ian, who can answer any of your questions. You are in capable hands. Thank you.
Seamless. Quick before your kids are left in the pool by
Yeah,
themselves.
I know.
Well, the strict instructions that if I didn't get here, Annelies' kids would be in the swimming pool by themselves.
See you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, hello. Sorry, I'm just starting with that saying hello. I will introduce myself on the next slide, on the next couple of slides, but I'll just finish the bit that I thought Annelies was going to get to. I was meant to have an hour. Just saying, she's a good talker. So if it seems a bit rushed, it's not my fault. Okay, so this year, which is why I want to talk about this, is, so can I just ask your kids, where are they at the moment? What sort of years are they?
Primary?
Primary and intermediate.
Primary and intermediate. Okay, so it's not going to. You don't need to panic yet. But the people who are intermediate, we are actually talking to intermediate teachers about these literacy and numeracy co-requisites, because we're thinking that we need to be building these skills in intermediate, so that when they come to years 10 and 11, it's really straightforward. And they're doing a great job of literacy and numeracy, but there's some slightly different things that we need to think about. So in schools this year, that's coming in. So in any school in New Zealand this year, teachers, it doesn't have to be a pilot, any school could apply to do the literacy and numeracy co-requisites, which are these exams that Annelies gave you a heads up about. Next year, that's the only way you can get literacy and numeracy. So this year they can do it by doing certain standards. Next year it's the only way. And the new NCEA level 1 will be there, and then new NCEA level 2 and NCEA level 3. So by 2026, all of this will be completely in place. So by then, maybe some of your kids will be getting pretty close to that end. So from then on, it will be completely the new system. That's the end of Annelies' slide. So this is me. Now, Cynthia, you're going to hear the same joke again, so just laugh like you threw it. So hi, my name's Ian McHale. You might notice that my accent is slightly different from Kiwi accent because I'm from England initially, right in the middle there, so I never used to see the sea, so whenever I get to see the sea now I'm really excited. And I've been teaching, I started teaching there in Derbyshire. I've been teaching for 30 years. I'm a science and chemistry teacher. I've thrown in a picture of Malaysia and Singapore because I've lived in both of those places and I've taught in Malaysia. I was actually a very young child in Singapore because my dad was in the forces and we lived there when I was very young. And then I went back there when I was an established teacher from England. And now I'm in New Zealand and I've spent most of my time in New Zealand up in Auckland. I've only just recently moved down to the Wellington region because I've just become a granddad and I wanted to be closer for the family. So, 30 years teaching, 20 years in New Zealand, 10 minutes doing this job that we're doing now. Very long. So we've only just moved, well done, you still laughed. I've done it loads of times now, my joke. It's a brand new role, and we're mostly teachers who have been teaching up to this point who've just been taken out of the classroom to try and support teachers to make all these changes, because there's lots of changes for teachers in the next couple of years. And part of that role is getting everyone to understand the literacy and numeracy, and we're really happy to come and do that for parents as well. So, Annelies went through all the other changes, and this is my detailed slide around the literacy and numeracy. So what used to happen was you picked it up as you went along. You might get some literacy in English, but you also might get it in some of my science standards. And I could certainly get you lots of numeracy in science, because lots of our standards were worth numeracy, and I could get some students didn't pass maths, but they did have numeracy because they got the standards from different places. But we have found that one of the things that people complained about was students were coming out of the school system and they had NCEA, and employees were saying, you know what, these people cannot read and write and do the workplace. So it's a problem that we are trying to address. So you could achieve NCEA and have literacy and numeracy, and yet employers were saying, I'm not seeing the skills here that I wanted to. So when you said about the change, will it be harder? I think it will be harder. And that's why we need to think about how we're going to make it as easy for our students as we go through as possible. And I've got some data which will show that they are finding it quite difficult at the moment. So you cannot now have NCEA until you've passed those standards. But they don't count towards the 60 that you get. Yeah. And you can sit them any time from year 9 to 13. And there will be schools, because there always are, who say, oh, our students do it in year 9 and so many of them pass and we're a really good school, but that isn't what it's designed for. And the students are meant to do it when they are ready to do it, and that's going to happen at different times. And if we're talking to schools at the moment, we are recommending that they don't do anything until the end of year 10, so that the students are ready and pass it easily. Because we don't think doing it early and failing is very good for the students or anybody, because it gets them thinking in the wrong way about themselves. There's 3 different assessments, numeracy, which is the maths, and the literacy is split into a reading and writing. And you can attempt them multiple times until you achieve them. So what I'm trying to encourage people to do is think about it very much like a driving test. So you are allowed to sit the driving test as many times as you need to, but you don't just rock up at the driving test without being prepared. So you need to make sure that you've done the work before you rock up to the driving test. And when my kids went through the driving test, I worked with them on their driving, and that cost me a clutch on my car because they weren't very good and we had to move to the automatic. But I worked with them, and then I got an expert, a driving instructor, to work with them as well. So I kind of want to think of it like the driving test, that there's things we can do at home to support our kids with their literacy and numeracy, but they're also going to be working with the experts at school. So it's not the parents' responsibility to make sure that the students have all the skills, but if we work together, it's much easier. So my kids only had to have a couple of driving lessons because I did most of the basic work with them. And one of them passed first time, and one of them took 4 attempts. But when she failed the first one, she didn't say, I'm never doing it again, I'm not doing a driving test. And that's what we want to think about literacy and numeracy as well. We don't want them to think it's a one chance and you can forget about it and you can get angry about it. You try, and if it doesn't work, you think what went wrong, and you listen to the feedback, and you go away and you do it again. And that's the kind of language I think we need to use when we're describing these, that whole driving test repetition idea. But we don't want students to have to sit it loads and loads of times, so we really want them to do it when they're ready to do it. Okay.
Does it advantage a child who sits it once and one who does it like 5 times? Is there a record of how many times I've tried?
That's a good question. Because in the pilots they said it wouldn't go on their record if they failed. But we have found that it is appearing on student records and parents have been complaining about it. So I think that is probably still developing. I don't think there's an answer yet. I don't think it should. I think if you have reached that level, that should be the end of the story. Nobody asks me how many times it took me to pass my driving test. They just look at my driving license.
Yeah.
So I hope that it is just that. But the school will certainly have it recorded. And you're right, it could build up as a negative story if we're not careful. Yeah. So it's something to think about. It's a good question for schools, how they're going to do that. Now, you may have seen some things in the newspapers. There's just been a new report actually, so this has been updated for the end of 22. These were pilots in the last couple of years, and this is the percentage of students that have passed. So you can see that the reading assessment was passed by more people. The writing was the weakest. These bottom two, Pongaru and Te Reo Matatini, this is numeracy in Maori medium, so it's the Te Kora Kaupapa Maori schools, where it's all in Te Reo. So they have a different exam. They do very well with the language, they're not doing very well with the numeracy at the moment. Now these numbers are not, they're not very representative of how hard the test is going to be, because the schools didn't wait to see who was ready. They put in the whole of year 10, and they wanted to see what would happen if they did that. So these are lower than we would expect them to be, and if we look at if the students are ready, some of these numbers jump up to about 85%. And the way that teachers know they are ready is dependent on the school and how they use different tests in school. So when you're getting your reports back from your primary schools, they'll often give you a level number, or they might talk about an EASTL result or a PAT result. Now all of those things are telling you a numerical position that your child is in at the moment in those different subjects. So for example, you might see that you have a level 4 in mathematics. Now, we are led to believe that these are low level 5. So you need to have reached level 5 to be comfortably passing these assessments. So if your student were going to be put into the exam, you might ask to see what evidence there was that they were ready, and the school should be able to show you. Yeah.
So the exams, do they have a hierarchy in grading with just pass fail?
Yes. So it's just pass or fail. There's no grades on them.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've achieved or you've not achieved.
Question: the writing, is it writing with a pen, or do they just do technology typing?
It's all digital,
okay,
which has created issues for people just logistically in schools at the moment. And some teachers in the latest pilot have asked that both paper and devices are available, because some students are being held back by their inability to use the technology.
How fast you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the how fast you are is interesting, because they are in fact allowed a long time to do it. I think it's something like up to 3 hours, but kids have not got to as long as 2 hours. So it's a very long time section they have to do it.
Okay.
And there are 3 different exams that they have to do to get all the way there, so they do have to do those all 3. So you need 3 different time slots to sit that. So you can see logistically, if you're going to do the whole year, that's quite hard, because you're going to have to take your year 10s out for big chunks of 3 days. And it would be better if they could just assess people one at a time. But there are only assessment times in the middle of the year and at the end of the year.
Okay, and are the exams standard? That's one. And the second one is, are they done at the same time?
They're done in a week slot, so like a week over which they are done. So the school doesn't have to do them exactly at that point, but they're given a time within which they have to do them.
And are they the same for each school?
Yes.
So if a student writes an exam somewhere else, they can tell others what the exams are about.
You know, I wish that students would. I wish that students would do that more often. Sorry. So there's a week slot, but there is a time slot for each one. Sorry, I'm not explaining myself very well. There's a week when they will all happen, but this might be Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. So yes, everyone nationally will do them at the same time.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
So every school will be, so if it was maths, everybody who is doing the exam will be doing it Monday, 10 o'clock.
Yeah. I've got to say, if my students were able to sit the exam and then go and tell someone else how to pass it, I'd be really happy. I tend to find they either don't turn up, or when they come, they kind of can't remember what they've done, or they didn't know what the answers were. But I'd be really happy to have to deal with cheaters. That would be great. That would be a level of critical thinking that I would really admire. Sorry, I've been teaching kids who have found it really hard to engage at times. So yeah, I don't usually think it that way, whereas a lot of the schools do think that way. So yeah. Well, I wish my kids were cared enough to cheat. That would be fantastic.
And my other question that I wanted to ask earlier, I think you alluded to it in terms of trying to get a foundation right and preparing them from intermediate before they get to writing these exams. Do you think we may have to go a bit back, maybe year 6 thereabout? Because my sense is that I think that, I may be wrong, but I think that what we are seeing at the end is maybe because the foundations before they get to those distances is a bit weaker, or we're not doing more in those areas.
So there's So I worked, one of my jobs was working with a Kahuyaka, which is a collection of schools, like a secondary school and all the primary schools and intermediate schools that feed into it. And it's very hard. So what I find happens is the junior school, they do the best work they can do. It goes to the next level up and those guys go, kids don't seem to remember anything you've done, and then they go up and they go, well, the kids don't, and everyone's blaming everyone else down the way. It's actually really hard for the students to remember everything they did and transfer it, and that repetition of skills is something that a lot of schools are working on, so that we can see that progression as we go through. So we're all really clear when these kids come out of primary school, this is where we think they're going to be at, and if they're not there, we're going to flag it for the next school along and say, actually, this kid really struggled with their writing, they really struggle to come up with their own ideas. So that is something we're going to focus on. But because of the way, and I think Cynthia's spoken to you already about the New Zealand schooling system, you can have a very different route through it. So you can go through a full school from 7 to 13, or you can go primary, intermediate, and then another school. So you might have 3 schools, and if they don't communicate well with each other, you don't know where they are. So the new curriculum coming in, and there's something called the PACT progression tool for teachers, is to try and monitor that progress so we really know where they are at. So yes, we will probably be talking to primary school teachers, and we've got people who work in senior curriculum and junior curriculum, and they talk to each other. But it is something that we are aware isn't quite where we want it to be yet. So it's going to be a hard, a bitter pill to swallow for some people at the moment. That's why it's appearing in the newspapers. There was an article yesterday about the latest results, and lots of these changes were designed because of a lack of equity, and these are reflecting that lack of equity. So our Maori and Pacific students, again, are on the bottom of the pile, and that's what we're trying to address, that's what we're trying to change. And most teachers are saying, well, look, written or even digital exams are not as accessible to some people, whereas before we were doing portfolio work.
Could it be that, especially from the math side of things, that they don't spend enough time on, you learn something and then you move to the next thing, whereas you find out, to acquire skill in those areas, you really need to do things over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I've done quite a bit of maths teaching as well, because once you're a science teacher, everyone thinks you can teach maths. And I have spent a day really cracking some algebra thing, like drawing a straight line from an algebraic equation, and everyone in the room can do it at the end of the day. So I start the next lesson as if everyone can do it, and it's just not there anymore. Because as some of my jobs, I've followed kids around a school for a day, and actually it's really tiring and hard work, because you go to your English teacher and they're all like, Shakespeare is so amazing, you should love this, you should read these books and feel it in your heart. And okay, that's pretty tiring, okay. And then you go off to maths, and this guy's like, oh, math is so important and it's really powerful. And then you come to my science lesson, I'm going, science is the thing. And I was exhausted after 3 lessons following these kids around. So it isn't easy, and we do need to highlight for them when they're doing these things. I'd really like, I mean, I'm working with quite a few schools, and I'm saying we need to give the students the responsibility for recognising when they're doing these things around the school, and write it down somewhere. And maybe they get a prize if they show they've covered all these different areas, to start them thinking and recognising that we're repeating these skills all over the place, because you're reading everywhere. And you just need to recognise that I've got that transferable skill and build those skills in, be absolutely right. It's a challenge for teachers, and it always has been, to actually make the learning stick, because there's so much to do. And one of the things we're trying to do with the new curriculum is mean that there isn't as much content, so they are actually learning skills that they can use.
Maybe another question now.
Yeah.
Again, is there any advantage, like if I pass it at tier 9, and maybe what happens if I can't pass it by 13, like I just can't?
So, I hope, do you remember when we go back to Annelies saying that you don't have to do level 1 now? Level 1 NCEA might not happen. So I would really hope that if students at the end of year 10 haven't passed it, that they will get extra support in year 11, and most of that year for them will be about achieving their literacy and numeracy, to make sure they can do that before they go into level 2 and start getting credits. So I can't tell you what will happen at year 13 if you haven't got it, because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
But there are also adult literacy programs that you could go into. So if you went from, if in year 12 you still hadn't got your literacy and numeracy, you probably are not going to be going to university at that point if you just go through year 13. So if I was talking to a year 12 student who had some credits but didn't have the literacy and numeracy, I'd be recommending they looked at that vocational education qualification. Look for a provider that you can work with and start earning some money, so maybe look for an apprenticeship or something like that in one of the trades academies. They will also be looking at getting you literacy and numeracy. But to have, and it will backtrack, so if they've got all their credits at level 2 and they haven't got their literacy and numeracy, as soon as they get it, because in theory you could do it any time as you keep going forward, it will track back. But yeah, that's going to be a big question, and we're probably going to have adult literacy programs to support people who haven't achieved it.
Oh yeah. I think my confusion is the years. Like, how old is a year? 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So year. Let me go backwards. It's easy if I go backwards. Year 13 is 18.
Okay,
18.
I see. Yeah. So you're looking
12,
at an 18-year-old
17.
who can't write, and okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
So the
Makes
year.
sense, yeah.
Year 11 to 16, so 15-year-olds is where I think we'll be starting to test it.
Oh, yeah,
They should, so they've got 3 years, they've got like
they
8
should be
opportunities to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just give you this sheet, and you'll find the things I said about thinking about a driving test at the bottom, because I think that's really important. I'm sorry, when I photocopied this, it was on a big sheet of paper, but Annelies has done a tiny version, so I hope you brought your glasses. So I wouldn't be able to see a thing without mine. Now, I'll give you that sheet now. I'm just going to talk to a few of the things you might want to do. And I'm really aware that I'm not an expert in parenting, I'm just a science teacher, okay? I have had 2 kids myself, and I've now got a grandchild, and I will be doing some of these things with them, because I've seen that these would help students when they are at school. But this is not a list of things you have to do, okay? We were asked to come up with things that people might do to support their students. In fact, the question initially we had when we produced this sheet was around, what can I do to help my kids with NCEA? And the biggest thing you can do to help students succeed at school is support them with their literacy and numeracy. So if you want to help your kids at home, then try and do some of these things, is my suggestion. But this is not an exhaustive list. You may already be doing things, which is why there's some gaps on there, because there's probably things you're doing already that you know are supporting their literacy and numeracy. And these are just some of the ideas. And some of them, if we look across the top here, are just about trying to encourage students to think positively about reading. So that it's something that happens and that they see happening. So I came from a very, think Coronation Street, I came from a very working class background in England. So I was the first person in my family to go to university. Nobody else in my family had ever been to university. The thing that happened that I think made that happen was that my father was obsessed with reading. He loved to read. So I would see him with a book in his hand all the time. And as soon as we were old enough, he would take us to the library every Saturday morning and we'd get some books and we'd bring them home. And I was the youngest, so I'd see my brothers getting books that were way too hard for me to read, and I would take them home because I wanted to read them as well, because I wanted to be part of their conversation. So I can identify that as the one thing my parents did which really made a difference for me. That it made me think that reading was really important all the time. If you have time and you can sit and read for pleasure, then please do it and make sure your kids see you doing it. I've got to say that a lot of my dad's reading ended up with him lying down on the sofa with a book over his face. But I feel like he was absorbing the story. And don't wake him up, whatever happens. The library is a great thing to do. It's free. Get yourself joined into a local library if you're not part of one. And you can order the books online, so you can just walk in and pick them up. You don't have to spend hours browsing in there. But they are really nice spaces for kids to be in as well. And I do talk about, to the kids today, when they talk about their video games, that it's a cheat code. I know from the students I can read, then they're well on their way to succeeding at school. And if they have difficulty reading and they don't like reading, then school's probably going to be difficult because they're going to be asked to do it all the time. And if reading to the kids and grandkids, again, the kids to read to each other or read back to you, fantastic. So these are all just about, you know, encouraging a love for reading in your home. And any reading is good, so it doesn't have to be the books and comics that I'm used to. It could be online. So if they're looking at blogs or they're reading web pages, that's okay. Or even lyrics. So when they're looking at a song on they might be able to see the lyrics of that song as well, so they can read along, because they love to be able to sing it at the same time. Any of those. The road code's a great place to go because they want to do that. But this next level is about critical thinking. So it isn't just being able to read, it's about asking questions about what you're reading. And this comes into that reading assessment. So think about what they're reading, and again, it doesn't have to be what they're reading. It could be a Netflix program, or a documentary, or a film you've all watched. But actually talk to them and ask them to think about the characters and have some opinions about what's going on. Oh, wow, that got quick. And what's going to happen next, and who their favourite character is, and what they like about that character, and what are their favourite books, and what are their favourite stories. And that will be different for different people, but they're all good reading. These ones down here, we're really getting into this, so I'm looking at what it says the kids have to be able to do to pass that standard. And to pass that standard, they will be asked things, so they have to be able to find information in this. If you've read something with them, say, oh, how old was that character? How old was that person in that news story? How long have they been doing that? So they can go back and find it. So that comprehension. They have to be able to identify opinion and bias and misinformation. Now this is a really important skill nowadays because there's lots of information out there. We're not just looking at the news channel, we're looking at 7 different news channels with different opinions of what is happening, brought to you in a different cultural and social context. And we need to identify that they are not the same. It's the same story, but there's bias and misinformation within those stories. And we need to teach our students how to do that. So getting them to think about, okay, you've just seen that on the news. Do you believe everything in that story? Do you agree with everyone in that story? That's a really powerful thing to do. And the difference between different types of texts. So if I'm writing a letter, which doesn't happen very often nowadays, I would say, or an email, it will be very different from if I'm writing a recipe where I'll put numbers and I'll write a list. So just recognise that they look different, so that when they see those different sorts of texts, they know what they're looking for. Now, okay. Now, when I wrote that slide, I found that quite easy because I spent a lot of time reading with my kids. And I thought, oh, that's a really fun thing to do because you've got all those storybooks and things like that. I found this one much harder because I didn't do much writing with my kids at all and was pretty horrified when I saw my son came into my class in year 11. He was in my class and his science answers were so difficult to read. Like the quality of his handwriting, because he's absolutely a digital person. So I really struggled with the quality of his handwriting. I'd seen it over the years, but when I saw his long answers that he was writing under pressure, I was like, whoa, I can't actually. So we had to spend some time thinking about the physical writing and have some strategies for him, and it was just about slowing down and do the planning first. He was rushing way too much. I knew he could write more clearly. But I hadn't looked at lots of his writing and helped him with that. So again, going back to the letters and shopping lists and things like that, think about how they look different. Look for things you can tell them straight away. Please, if you see an example of your student's writing, of your son or daughter's writing, and they have not put capital letters and full stops, please tell them to do that, because you will not believe how many times a literacy teacher has to say that to students. If we can all do it together, it might save us all time. Commas, if you read the sentence to them, they will realise that there's not a chance to breathe. So show them that you can feel a point to stop there and say, okay, I'll just pause there, I'm going to put a comma and carry on. Show them what it's useful for. Question marks. There's some more, and they're becoming more complicated and more teacher-like when I get to things like this, but these are the sorts of things they're looking for in their writing. And how to plan writing. So if I'm going to write a letter to the council to complain about them not cutting the grass or something, I'm going to sit down and do a little plan first as to the things I want to say and how I'm going to be polite and all those sorts of things. So they're just some ideas. Now, I haven't just made these ideas about my head, I've looked at the standards and what they require, and that's why I'm giving you these ideas. I think that writing one's quite hard, but if your students are happy for you to look at something they've written in an English lesson or a science lesson, you could really help them. And teaching them to be happy with proofreading's hard, because teenagers tend to do it once and never want to look at it again. I've done it, Dad. I know you've done it, but it could be better. Now that whole technique of English teachers do it all the time. Science teachers, not so much. We just kind of take it and say, that could be better, but we don't make them do it. So if we get the idea that proofreading, we're helping them, we're not criticising them. We're trying to get it a little bit better every time.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of writing, as we enter more and more into the digital age, is it still relevant to emphasize?
Okay, so the physical writing, maybe not as much, but digital writing, just the same, needs to be assessed. Okay. So within
there
the
are lots of tools that help you with that, like Grammarly and stuff like that. They'll put commas for you, even do spell checks and all sorts of other things. I'm okay for them to do that, because when they you have to click it and correct it, and it will sink in. So I'm okay for Grammarly to be used, as long as they're aware of what's happening. So why have you done that? And then they can reproduce it themselves, because they won't have Grammarly when they do the test. So they can't correct it digitally then. There's no tools like that. Right? Well, soon artificial intelligences will be writing all the answers and we'll all be clever all the time. One of the things that it will do is it will read the text to them. So in these tests, they can click a button and it will read the question to them. So that is there to help them, but they won't have spell check or anything like that in there. So they will have to do those themselves.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, students are not, the apps that they use for writing, depending on which level and which school they are at, they don't have access to those Grammarly that helps, that automatic help. They don't have that, not in the schools that I've been teaching at least.
Some schools will turn off the things on Google Drive so they can't use them. So for that reason, they want to see what they've got. And actually, I've had students hand me pieces of writing which on their screen has got loads of red underlining in, but they'll still print it off and give it to me. So they don't feel they necessarily have to correct it. And then I'll say, oh, you need that, and they'll go, oh, that's why it's red. That's it. So they don't always actually use the help that's offered to them, I've found. So I'd encourage them, if they are writing and they see those lines, say, why? Why is that red? Why is that blue? And it gives you another idea. So I think that stuff will improve our writing, as long as we don't just click. Because sometimes they're really silly suggestions, and it can make the writing look silly. I love maths. We do hear about people who say things like, oh, yeah, I hated maths at school, as if that's an okay thing to say. Well, if you say that to your kids, they're going to believe that it's okay to say, I hate maths as well. So we've got to have a positive mindset about it and say things like, you can't do it yet, but you will be able to do it. And maths is really good because it's really powerful, because if you have the superpower of being able to do maths, then you're going to be richer. You're going to know when someone gives you the wrong bill in a restaurant. You're going to be able to do your taxes when you work for yourself, all those things. So talk about how good it is to be able to be good at maths. Play games that encourage maths use. Measuring and calculating are math skills, which they might not recognise they will need all the time. So when kids say to me, I'm never going to use these, I'm like, well, if you're going to be a plumber, you're going to need to measure the length of a pipe and where it's got to go to and from and where you need to cut it. It's a real life skill. The assessment asked them to look at data together and make statements. So that graph I showed you before, you might say, so what do you think this shows? Or they might look at some data from a sports event and say, what does this show? But get them to think about what they're looking at. Use maps. I made my son go orienteering with a paper map so he could understand what it was when he was looking at Google Map and not just listening to the instructions. But actually looking at Google Maps and following it on the map is a really useful skill as well. But be able to use a map and position yourself. Budgeting, savings plans, construction kits. Some of these might be obvious, some of them might not. I'd just kind of throw that list out to you and say there are things we can be doing, and literacy and numeracy is going to be the big deal in this country in the next few years. That's going to be the one we're really going to have to focus on. And schools are trying, but it hasn't always been successful. Pretty much on my last slide here. Oh, this is a bit of a bugbear for me. They go to an exam and they put up that clock on the wall and then they write 9:05 to 9:55 and the kids have no idea what this tells them. This is an old antique that they've never seen, they do not use. They look at their phone and they see 9:55. So can I encourage you to make sure that they can read a clock? Because I have come across lots of students who can't and are quite happy to say they can't because they don't think it's a relevant skill. But the last time I did this presentation, the room had been used for an exam and there was a clock there and the exam times were there. And those students wouldn't have known what time it was. And this other one is, I know that it's really hard to do all these things, but we end up being in the car with our kids stuck in traffic. I'm from Auckland, so I did this a lot. We spent a lot of time sat in cars. And if there's a number plate in front, and I challenge you now, what's the longest word you can make that has those three letters in order?
Highest.
Well, that's a good one.
No, highest is not. ST, no. Highest.
HT.
Heights, you can have heights, yeah, because that's in
Heights,
order.
yeah. Hilltops.
Hilltops.
Hypertension.
You win. I think my best was 9, so you beat me, well done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Must remember to take my tablets as well. I also like to do this one where I go, okay, look at those numbers, how could I make, you've got to use all three numbers, can you do a sum that would make, 17, that's a straightforward one, 8 plus 9 plus 0, okay, that's a straightforward one. What about,
1,000.
See, I normally do one I know you can do. Well, you can do, how close to 1,000 can you get?
Yeah.
110.
110.
90 times
That
8.
Now, you don't have to do any of these things. Pretty good.
Yeah.
You don't have to do any of these things, but I'm just saying that you can fit them in the day. And you can, it can be there for your kids. And my kids used to play games like that all day long. My wife hates the number game. She really hates it, because we'd ask her and she'd be like, oh no, I knew you'd ask me. But do try and fit something into the day and maybe look at those and go, I do that already, I do that. Maybe I could try some of these. So it's just a suggestion. Everything we all do as a team, you don't have to be responsible for literacy and numeracy for your students, but let's kind of make it teamwork rather than just the teacher doing it. Now there's a few more slides, and I know that I'm past my time, so I'm not going to talk very much. about homeschool relationships. Schools in New Zealand are very open to communication from parents who want to know what's happening with their kids. And most of them would be really, really welcoming to you if you want to talk to them about what's happening. And if that isn't the case, then you should really be contacting the board or the ministry to say they don't want to talk to me. So that should be the case, but I've found them always to be really positive and welcoming. Is that a good sign? There's no good side. And this is what we've just been talking about, supporting your kids to do those sorts of things. Same again, with more ideas. This website, if you just look for parents.education.government.nz, you'll find all the resources in the pack that we've given you and loads more information about anything else that we can help you with. I know that I'm past my time, so I want to stop there, but if you've got any questions, please feel free. Did you talk about the universities, overseas universities?
No.
Ah, okay. So this was something that we asked beforehand. Cynthia mentioned to us that some people here had asked about whether it's transferable qualification. So we are very aware that these 3 countries accept NCEA as a qualification. But that doesn't necessarily mean if you get level 3 you can walk into any university course. So you need to check the prerequisites for particular courses. But those are the ones that people easily transfer to because they're very similar systems. Does that cover that question? I'm not sure if there's any more. And are there any more questions? I'll stop talking.
I've got one. You sort of touched it when you said you work with schools. So is that some form of audit assessment in terms of quality of delivery in schools? Or
so my role is NCEA implementator facilitator. So at the moment, I'm sitting alongside them to try and help them make sure they have processes to do this. So because the numbers came out quite low of the pilots, we're worried that students aren't being prepared well enough for the pilots or put in when they're ready. So if they were wondering how to do that, they might give me a call and I'd go along and I'd sit down and explain how they could possibly do it. So we don't audit them at the moment. That would be, we have a different organisation called the Education Review Office, ERO, and you can look up an ERO report on any school and find out their last report and see what people are saying. But my job is more support than auditing of how they're doing it.
Yeah, it was more around schools being independent in terms of how they deliver the education. Because the curriculum is there, but how they do it differently.
Yes, so the thing I really like about the New Zealand curriculum is there's actually loads of flexibility. So a school here could look very different from a school in rural New Zealand and could look very different from one in the far north. Because where they are and where the experiences that their students have are very different. So like earthquakes might be a really common subject to talk about here, but volcanoes are much more common if you head up to Auckland, because you're unlikely to get an earthquake up there, but you will get them down here. So when we look in the local area and we say, okay, well, we're teaching about landforms and earth structure, what should we talk about? It might be different from one place to another. So it is a very broad curriculum. I think that's a strength, not a weakness.
There's a question to Cynthia. Are we able to get the slides?
I
Is that possible?
will send them to Cynthia, and then she can pass it to you. Is that all right?
Yeah, and I'll send them from there.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that everything?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
From our survey,
Yeah.
and the question was how to encourage and support parents to work with teachers. And since you have a teaching background, and if you can just give us a best way to keep them in contact with your teachers, yeah.
Yeah. So it will be slightly different from primary, intermediate, secondary. In primary schools, at the start of the day, and talking to them or seeing them at the end of the day. There's also loads of ways that primary schools are connecting, maybe through Google Classroom or Seesaw, which is another online thing that the teachers use, where they put the student work on and you can see copies of that. But that depends very much on the school and how they're doing it. So I would encourage face-to-face contact in primary schools because that person is so important in your child's time at the primary school. When you move to intermediate, they'll be in a homeroom, but they'll move around a little bit more and they'll have more teachers. So the homeroom teacher is still your first port of call, but they might not be able to tell you about what's happening in technology because they won't be the teacher at that time or PE. But always go to the homeroom teacher first. When it gets to secondary school, so as a secondary school teacher, I'm teaching 150 kids. So I won't be able to talk to all their parents, usually. But I often would put my email up on the board for the students. The first thing to do would be ask the students if they've got an email for the teacher. And go to the web page for the teacher if it's a subject-specific question. Now, personally, I would happily reply to an email from parents, but some teachers would prefer that you go through the office first. So there will be a pastoral system. If you go to the office, they'll tell you who you should be connected to. But I would go out of the way at the start of the year to put my email on the board and get all the students to write it down, so you could ask me a question about when an assessment was. So if your child has got an email that they've been given, happy to use it, and you can also find it on the website. If it's on the website, the school are happy for you to use it. But there will be systems for each one. So it's there's usually a year 10 pastoral lead. So if your student's in year 10, that's the first point of call for you once you've been to the office. So it will vary as you go through, but I think, again, as I've said, I think most New Zealand schools are really open to being contacted. Are you working in a New Zealand school? Yeah. So we are really welcoming to parents.
Yes, absolutely, yes. I think the education department also emphasises that relationship strengthening. As I've mentioned before, there is the tutor teacher in the secondary school. Each child journey at secondary school starts with a tutor teacher, and that tutor teacher will be with your child until year 13. They're the same person, so it is very open to parents, yes.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, that almost depends on the schools as well, because in my school, I was always a year 9, so I always had the new kids, and then I just passed them on. So we had experts at different year levels.
Okay.
So I wouldn't follow them through, but it would still be the person you contact. So in year 9, you contact me, but in year 10, it would be the tutor teacher for year 10. Okay. So it's just a matter of asking and finding out what the system is, yeah? Does that answer that question?
And also, our sister, she actually deals with she will really respond to your feedback. So if you could kindly respond, to those feedback forms that we give you, it would be really great for us, to just come back to you with further feedback on your questions. Thank you so much, Ian.
Very well.
You've been very, very helpful. Are there any more questions for Ian, please? It's been great.
Cool. And just on behalf of us, thank you very much. Or something.
Well, I'll take the chocolate.
I was going to say, if you're doing a lot of these community hubs, I feel like you're probably getting a lot of flowers.
Yeah.
A lot of pot plants.
I should pass something. I hope Cynthia's getting something as well. Eddie. Yes, thank you very much. It's I had to go to a biology meeting, a biology science teachers meeting before I came to you, and they were very grumpy because of things that changes. So it's lovely to come to a group of smiling people. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job. Oh, thank you. I don't know any small for that one. Thanks very much.
I thought the session was very good, especially coming into it with not knowing anything about NCEA and how it was structured. And so it was good having that introduction telling you what it was about. And I guess the participation from those who attended was quite good because they asked very, very relevant questions. I guess we're all coming from different backgrounds, and the education system back home is quite different. So it was an eye-opener, and I guess it provided some information now, and I could go and start looking at websites and just finding out more as to what this all means. So yeah, it was quite good. The organization was good. Well done to you and the team.
So the session today was very informative. Today we were covering NCEA and the changes that are proposed, or the changes that are coming in NCEA. The facilitators were from Ministry of Education, so very experienced, and they are actually part of the NCEA implementation. So they were not just talking about the theory, but the practicality on how it's going to be implemented. They also had good tips on parents and how parents can support their kids with the NCEA and with the learning. And the support just doesn't start in college when they're doing NCEA, but support that you can give them throughout from when they're kids and as they go through primary and intermediate. So I found the session to be quite informative. There was opportunities to ask questions. We did a comparison of the system that we might have grown up in the different countries that we've grown up in, how that system compares to the New Zealand system, how it's different and how it's similar. And so that helps us be able to understand the system better and how we can support our kids through the system. So I'd really encourage people to come for these sessions because they're quite informative and they're useful in terms of us being able to support our kids with their education.
Really well organised, easy to find. I came in halfway through, my other colleagues started the session. Everyone was interested in what she was talking about. It was really helpful to get some information beforehand about what people wanted to know so that we could do a little bit of preparation rather than just talking about NCEA. It was clear that people wanted to know about university entrance and things like that, so it's really helpful if we know what the questions are before the session. Sometimes in these sessions everyone sits very quietly, but this was quite a vocal group. They're asking lots of questions. There's no concerns about putting their hands up and saying, look, can you just clarify that for me? And we love that. We love questions. If we stand in a room and we're just talking, we don't think that people are understanding or hearing all the important messages. So it felt very good. There's lots of smiles on faces, which always makes it easier as a presenter. So I really appreciated that. So yeah, we had communication before about what we might need to talk about. Involvement from the group were there. When they were asked to do an activity by Annelies, there was lots of sharing back about what the education system was in home countries and what the differences are. And there's obviously people who are really caring about how their kids are going to do at school, and that's a really good feeling. I just had the gentleman there really wanting to pin down what his son had to do for university entrance, and it isn't simple, and lots of Kiwis struggle to get their heads around it until their kids are really in amongst it. So you should never feel bad about asking questions because lots of people have questions about the system. It is not a really straightforward system. When I came from the UK, I had to relearn the whole thing. So it is not a weakness not to know, and it really felt good that people were asking lots of questions.